Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which consists of 6 thoughts about reading, writing, or just something related to storytelling. So I've got my 6 things ready. It is early in the morning over here, but I am ready to get started. So number 1, of course, I want to update y'all on my works in progress. So I finished the Machiavellian revisions just a couple days ago. So that's book 3 of the Firmament series. And so just wrapped up all my edits on the second edition for that one. And it's interesting because I mentioned last week that I felt that the writing quality and writing style on that one was actually really good. It didn't require quite as much work as the last couple did, and I still feel that way after finishing it. It's kind of funny because I actually feel like the writing style on it is a little better than some of the stuff I'm even doing now in certain ways. So I'm not really sure what happened. It was, let's see, apparently I published that in 2016, so it was quite a while ago. But anyway, but I will say, while the quality of the writing was good, I'm not quite sold on the story and the plot. like they're okay, and I still enjoy the story, mostly just because I really enjoy the characters. I really enjoy the antagonist in that story. He's one of my favorites that I've created, and I enjoy a lot of discussions the characters have and specific things that happen in the story, but just kind of the overall, the plot and the way it fits into the series. I just was left kind of going, this feels like kind of an off episode. And I decided just to be reconciled to that because, series, not every episode is going to be the greatest in any series. But it just feels a little convoluted. Some things, I'm not sure if they 100% make sense. And it doesn't seem to have a lot of impact on the events of the rest of the series, although there are some things that are going to come back around. But I think also, especially as the series has gone on in the last few books, they've been much more interconnected and building on each other. And this one was kind of a little bit more of a one-off, although, like I said, some things will come back around, but it still doesn't feel like it's necessarily as tied into the larger story. And again, that's okay, but it just kind of left me going like, I don't know if it was my best as far as like the actual structural components, but that's okay. I still really enjoy it, and I hope that readers enjoy it also, of course. So number 2, since I finished that, I started yesterday on revising Reversal Zone, which is book 4. And I realized as I started it that I really did not remember this one very clearly. I think I may remember it the least of the whole series, and that makes sense because it's right in the middle of what I've done so far. But I do remember, all the basic plot elements, and from what I recall, it's one of my favorite out of the series, and it's one, it was a plot idea that I had long before I ever created the Firmament series, so it's something I'd wanted to create and kind of like experiment with for a really long time. And I think, based on my memory, that the plot of this one is better and a little bit tighter, and so far the writing seems pretty good. I did a couple of chapters yesterday and they didn't require that much editing, so hopefully this one will go pretty smoothly. But I'm really pleased with how the project's going overall. After this, I'll just have a couple more books to do, and then I'll just have to briefly go through book 7, Eleftheria, and I'm not going to do any major edits on it, but I need to make sure that now that I've changed the ages of a couple characters, I just need to make sure those things are consistent, and then we'll be good to go. And they should all be re-released in April or May, and May is also when book 8, Humanoid, is coming out. So lots of exciting things coming up. I'm really happy that I'm finally doing this. But anyway, looking forward to continuing with Reversal Zone over the next couple of weeks. So number 3, I know I've mentioned the writers group, weekly writers group that I attend, although I don't attend it weekly anymore. But I attend it occasionally. But there is actually, and I love that group, and I especially love the people, and they're amazing, talented writers. But there's also a local, specifically Christian writers group that I was invited to literally at least 7 years ago, like when I first moved to the area. And it's only once a month. And so literally every month since then, I've thought about going and then chickened out because, I mean, for one thing, it's on the same day of the week as my other writers group, which is now also the same night of the week as my church's small group. So I have to, pick and choose what I'm going to do on Wednesday nights. And so that doesn't leave me, time to do it all. But also, like, I'm just was so intimidated at the idea of going somewhere else new and people I don't know and whatever. And it's also the regular writers group that I attend is much more like an open mic type situation where you're just sharing your work. And this is much more serious. Like, they actually will have critique groups, and you bring copies of your work for people to, actually mark with critiques and things like that. So, which I think both are valuable, but it was just going to be different. And so I have just literally almost every month, I think, for the past several years, I've thought about going and just have not. And so last month, I mentioned it to my husband, and he was like, "Why have you not gone to that? You got to go. Like, you should go. I think it would be really good for you. I think you would really like it. And I think that it would really fill a need that you have. Like, I think you should do it." And I was just like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, maybe we'll see." So I put it on the calendar. And as always, like, the closer that it got, the more I was like, I'm not going to do that. Which just seems so pathetic, but it is my way. But he was really like, "Nope, you're not going to get out of it this time. I really think you should go. So, I'll watch the kids. You need to do it." So and one thing I did to help was, since I don't have a printer at home, I have to just order all my printing from Office Depot. And then thankfully now they have curbside pickup. So it's real easy for me to just drive by and pick it up. And it's really cheap. It's just like a few cents a page to do black and white. Probably cheaper than buying ink for any printer I've ever had, honestly. So I want my own printer again someday, but for now I'm happy doing this. So I did go and order a bunch of copies of an excerpt of one of my novels that I really wanted some critique on. And because I paid money toward actually going, even though it was less than $5, it still helped motivate me because I am quite a saver and strongly motivated by money. So I did end up going last night, and of course it was not that scary, although it is still very difficult for me to speak up in groups. And even if it's a group I'm totally comfortable with, I for some reason get super red in the face as soon as I begin speaking in any group. And so that's very annoying and just makes me more self-conscious. But I made it, and the people, of course, were super nice, all very talented writers. And a girl from my church also showed up, and I knew that she was a writer and that she'd attended at least once, but that was nice to at least have a familiar face. And so, yeah, it was really great to participate, and they seemed to enjoy my work and had some good thoughts on it, which I really appreciated. So, especially since it's just once a month, hopefully it's something that I can make a habit of. And I'm glad that my husband forced me to go to that. The number 4, this might be offensive to some people, but I do not like the book Charlotte's Web. I am just not a big E.B. White fan in general, and I just find his books very strange. I like The Trumpet of the Swan, but the other two it's just a little weird for me. But I did watch the movie Charlotte's Web a whole bunch when I was a kid. And I still remember thinking it was weird, but they had it at the library, so I got it for my kids to watch. And we watched it, I think, day before yesterday. And it was definitely weird. And in some ways, it was weirder than I remembered, or in different ways. Because then also, as we're watching it, and this whole thing is based around how it's horrible for for them to kill this pig for me. And I actually don't think that's horrible at all, and don't want my girls to think it's horrible. And so I was kind of like concerned about what they would think about that, and not even sure if they would pick up on what was going on. But Violet, who, it's just as she gets older, she has more and more thoughts and makes more connections. And anyway, so she had all these comments and questions as we were watching it that were so much fun to just interact with. So at one point she turned to me and she's like, well, why are they going to kill the pig? And I said, because that's how they have to get meat. That's what they do to get meat from the pig. And from a pig we get, things like sausage and bacon. And so that's, that's just how it works. And her only comment was, oh, I like bacon. And I was like, okay, cool. She's not going to turn vegan from watching this silly movie. But she also had some more in-depth observations, like this is obviously a huge spoiler, but Charlotte's Web has been around for long enough that I think it's okay to say. So at the end, Violet was just talking to me about the story, and she kind of was thinking, and she goes, so in the end, instead of the pig dying, the spider died. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And and we got to talk about that's just how it goes in life. Everything that God made will die, but we just had a good talk about that, and it was really actually sweet. So I'm glad we watched it, and it's just so fun watching her and all of them learn and grow and just learn to interact with stories and things like that. So number 5, my currently reading, and as I was making my notes for this episode, I realized that since last week, I finished the book I was reading that I talked to y'all about last week, the Jane Austen education book, and then I've read literally 3 full books and started a 4th since then. So apparently I'm reading more than I thought, and I'm just in such a reading mode lately. The more I read, the more I realize how many books I want to get through in this world. And I become more motivated. And plus I find as I exercise my reading muscle, it just becomes more natural and easier for me to read. And so lately, I'd much rather read than watch TV most of the time, which even though I've always loved reading, I've never been like that. So there's also just not a lot of good stuff I can find to watch. So a lot of times I'm just like, I'd really rather be reading because there's just so many books out there. So all that to say, just a couple nights ago, I finished The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which, excuse me, I had bought many years ago to read because I wanted to read more classic science fiction. And I have to say, so far, all the books I've bought, well, all but one, I think, of the books that I bought for that reason have just been kind of disappointing. So I don't know, maybe it's not the type of science fiction for me, is not the famous kind. I have no idea. And the exception, by the way, is iRobot, which I do love. But anyway, so the last few things I'd read had been a little heavier, and so I thought I just want something light and silly, and I knew it was very silly because I have seen the movie. So I went ahead and read that. And what was interesting about it is that I was fully prepared to love it because I knew I'll have a lot of friends that really love it. I knew it was, famous science fiction. I knew it was kind of whimsical and nonsensical and humorous writing, which I generally enjoy. And so I was prepared to love it, and I ultimately didn't really love it that much. There are certainly, and I did really enjoy the writing style and kind of the nonsense humor and things like that. And I did find it more interesting as I went along. At first, I really did not care for it at all. But I don't know, it just wasn't really doing it for me, and I can't totally put my finger on why, except that, part of it was honestly just the worldview, because it's just so, obviously it's not serious about much. It's, like I said, just very silly, ridiculous story. But it still clearly has a point of view about God and the universe, and it wasn't a point of view that I cared for. And so even though I wasn't reading it as a serious book, that still would just kind of nag me a little bit now and then, and that just hinders my enjoyment. But it was also just, I don't know, maybe it's just I was not really in the mood to read it, but it just wasn't really doing much for me. So I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. However, what's really interesting is I kept kind of comparing and contrasting it with another book I'd read shortly before, which is extremely different. So also last week I read the book An Irish Country Doctor for my book club, which is tonight. Very excited about it. And that book is just like a slice of life. You know, it's about an Irish country doctor and just kind of his patients and relationships, and especially the relationship with the doctor that he works under and all those things. And I was fully prepared to love this book because I like a really good slice of life story. And it just like, you know, the description appealed to me, and I was just ready to be pulled into it and charmed. And I just wasn't. Like, I really didn't care for any of the characters. And again, also as far as things just bugging me, the characters just constantly take the Lord's name in vain, which I just could not really get past. Like, it was just really bothering me. And I don't know, I just didn't care that much about anybody. I didn't find anything that happened all that compelling. I just was not that invested into it. And again, similarly to Hitchhiker's Guide, it kind of drew me in and was a little more interesting as I went along, but I still ended up just giving it 3 out of 5 stars. However, here's what's interesting, is that both of those books are the start of a series. And when I finished Irish Country Doctor, my immediate thought was, I have exactly 0% interest in reading any more of this series. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm never picking up another one because it's just so uninteresting to me. But when I finished Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the first thing I did was go and request the next book from the library. And it's just interesting. I mean, even though I didn't love it and there were things about it that bugged me, I still found the characters and, you know, where it left you and things like that compelling enough that I had enough curiosity, especially since it was a really short, easy read. It only took me like, I think, a couple of days to read. So it's not like a huge commitment to read the rest of the series. It was compelling enough to me to drive me to go get the next book. So I've been really like just kind of pondering the differences. And I think for me, it really is all about the characters, because that was my main issue with the Irish Country Doctor. Is there was literally not one single character I was enormously compelled by. Some were a little better than others, but I just didn't care that much. Like, I don't care to find out what happens to these people in the rest of the series. Whereas with The Hitchhiker's Guide, even though there was a lot of things I didn't love about it, I did enjoy the characters, and they were cute and interesting, and just made me want to know what happened next to them. And so I think that was very instructive to me as a writer, and especially as a series writer. And I hope that, and I know that for my series, for Firmament, the characters are my favorite thing. And I hope that that is something that drives people, even if there is, like I said, a little bit off episode, that it's something that pulls people forward into the rest of the series. The number 6, I went a little bit longer on number 5 than I usually do, so this might be a bit of a longer episode. But I actually had another thought with some comparisons about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that I thought I would talk a little bit about. So I mentioned that I'd seen the movie a long time ago, and I really did not like the movie. Like, it was so bizarre and just weird and random, and I did not like it. But I did not let that, have me judge the book, because I know better than that. So, and I did find the book to be much better. And the reason, even though from what I remember about the movie, they stuck pretty closely to the book, the real charm and enjoyment of the book is the writing style. It is the humor and just the voice of the narrator. Like, that literally is the book. Like, the book is the voice of the narrator. That's what makes it what it is. And so I think that just cannot translate well to the screen, and you have to end up having a lot of narration, which makes for a weaker movie or show. And it just doesn't work. And it also made me think of a series of unfortunate events, because that was the exact same way I felt about the Netflix adaptation of that series that came out a few years ago, because I love the books and find them just so funny and charming and enjoyable. And The show, again, even though it stuck pretty close to the books, I was just kind of like meh. Like it was okay, but it did not have that same charm, and it is because the charm of the book is in the humor and the style of the writing and the narration. And there's no possible way to translate that well to the screen. And so it's not in like the events of the story are not what makes those good books. The events are just stupid pretty much. It is the author's voice as he tells the story. And that also just got me thinking about the differences between books, movies, and then also plays are the third category. And the reason why the book is almost always better than the movie. Now, there are a few books out there that I think have made, great movie adaptations, but it's so rare. And even with plays, a lot of times when you see a movie that was a play, something doesn't translate well about that either. Um, and, vice versa. All this, a story is not just a story. Like the format actually does matter. And there was a great quote in a writing book that I read a really long time ago, and I honestly can't even remember what book it was, so I apologize about that. But it was talking about the differences between, and this actually may have, I think this was a screenplay writing book. It may have been Screenwriting for Dummies, but I could definitely be wrong about that. But it was talking about the differences between books, plays, and movies, and